Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. I thanks to the organizers of this group and to the Sharks. I hope you had a nice full breakfast this morning. Addition. So I'm Steve Steinberg. I'm the therapeutic endoscopist and co-founder of EndoSound. And our vision is to democratize endoscopic ultrasound, to make EUS available for patients everywhere, literally anywhere there is endoscopy. I think most people in the audience are familiar with endoscopic ultrasound. We do ultrasound from the inside out as compared to traditional ultrasound, which visualizes from the outside in. About 1 million EUS procedures are done every year. Most of them are done in an outpatient setting. What's the need? What's the opportunity? Virtually every tertiary care center in the country has endoscopic ultrasound capability. It's crucial to the care of their patients, yet only about 20% of community hospitals, fewer than 5% of ASCs have the capability to do EUS. When you look at countries outside the US, the need is even greater still. So what's the problem with legacy systems? First of all, the capital requirements are rather high, out of the reach of certainly all surgery centers and many hospitals, especially in the post-COVID days. Maintenance is costly and burdensome. FDA has issued a recall for the same elevator problems that are found in ERCP scopes, and so that represents both a problem and another burden in terms of using those scopes. And then lastly, they don't have much flexibility. They're bulky, they're not movable, they have only a single function. And so thinking about this and trying to find a solution, I engaged about 10 years ago in my first R&D activity related to this project. And it looked something like that. And so I took that paper napkin and a couple of slide decks, and I went out to seek my fortune with the strategics. And as you can imagine, they all ran, right? Nobody's interested in a science project. The breakthrough came in 2015 when I serendipitously got hooked up with Scott Corbett, who's an ultrasound engineer who had devised that finger probe that you see. And we sort of thought that if you could put a probe on the end of a finger, why couldn't you put it on the end of an upper endoscope and have it be functional? Well, it's never as easy as that. It took a lot of work. And we got to what was our first prototype, which not only managed to get that probe on the end of a scope, but also allowed it to function in a therapeutic manner as well. And I'll show you some more of that. Most importantly, of course, is what are the images like? And so we were pleased that the initial images that we got from this technology were comparable to what we were seeing with my Pentax systems, of which I have 3 rooms in my unit. And so that progress led us to this IP and additional patents that have solidified our intellectual property protection and set us off on the question. Next question was, well, that's great, you got a device, but is there a market for it? Will somebody buy it? What does that look like? If you look at EUS worldwide, it's a $1 billion market even as we speak. It's growing year over year at about 6.5%. Good news is it's already reimbursable. We don't have to climb that hill. And so our target market is existing endoscopic ultrasound providers, those people that already are performing 1 million endoscopic ultrasound cases per year, and those are the people that we're looking to target. 95% of the cases that they do are done in hospitals. I think most everybody's aware that the push is to get those procedures out of hospitals and into the ASC. Medicare is doing that. ASCs are less costly for payers. They're more convenient for patients. They're certainly more convenient for the physicians who don't have to stand in the endoscopy unit in the hospital waiting for their slot and waiting for the anesthesiologist to show up. Furthermore, physicians own and derive income from those ASCs, and physicians decide where those cases get done, so they make the decision where that procedure is going to be done. You've seen the result of that in 32 million upper endoscopies and colonoscopies that have migrated to ASCs over the last 10 years. The only reason EUS hasn't followed that pathway is the price, and we fixed that. If you were to look then at the market that derives from that, it's a fairly substantial one, depending on the migration degree that you get, 20, 50, 80% migration. Remember, colonoscopy and upper endoscopy has already set the bar. 95% of those procedures have already migrated to the ASC setting. So we've got a prototype and we got a market to take it to. Now comes the hard work. And so this was the real R&D that took place. And it involved putting together a team that was experienced both in therapeutic endoscopy, in ultrasound, in engineering, in regulatory, in GI endoscopy in general. Adding consultants who filled in the gaps that we were missing. Finding contract manufacturers who could produce product, and making sure these days that we had supply chain redundancy. Doing the really hard engineering and regulatory work that involves validation and verification, manufacturing, design for manufacturing, and all of the details that none of us ever think about when it comes to getting a product to market, and the same thing on the commercialization side. That brought us to a pathway that we think is getting close to a commercialization potential. We were granted FDA breakthrough designation status, which essentially makes the FDA our partner in this by virtue of our increased access to care and by virtue of the safety profile. That designation got us an early pre-sub with validation and verification that we would have 510(k) status and that human studies would not be required. We therefore are looking for a planned FDA approval in fourth quarter this year, and we have a similar pathway for CE mark in the EU. On the commercialization side, the CPT code's in place, as I mentioned, and the team for marketing, for development is all in place as well, and we've got our launch sites identified. With that in mind, here's the product which converts an upper endoscope into a fully functional therapeutic endoscope in less than 5 minutes. It operates either as a forward or a side viewing linear echo endoscope and provides therapeutic capability in the manner that you can see here. Well, that's all fine, but it's got to work. And so we brought it into the pig lab, and so this system that you're looking at has 10% of the cost of legacy systems. So we overcome that obstacle that we discussed. It doesn't have an elevator, so the safety profile is much better, and that concern goes away. And lastly, it's flexible so that it can be used as a point-of-care ultrasound as well as endoscopic ultrasound. This was our initial, some images from our initial animal lab study. You can see visualizations of the celiac axis, the aorta, liver, the Doppler capability that's included in liver biopsy. And so the next question was, well, what would people think about it? And so this was a study, it's a little busy, but it was 5 different operators, 5 different levels of experience, and what they concluded was, in general, that we were had a favorable profile to their legacy systems, and that in particular applied to image quality, size, depth of field, and the ability to target. So we were rather pleased about that. We took that to the in-man arena, and so this is our initial study of 5 patients that will be presented in abstract here this afternoon. It was accepted at the ESG and WEO as well, and it demonstrated in comparison with the Pentax Arietta system that we could obtain the same images, the same diagnostic capability. This provides you some of the actual images. A patient with a pancreatic cancer, you can see the dilated pancreatic duct. Here's the liver, the porta hepatis, gallbladder coming into view with some sludge. You can even see the pericholecystic fluid, a couple of stones there. Next, we see a snap of the tumor. There's a bile duct stent in place. The lymph node has a needle puncturing it. Therapeutic procedure here. And diagnostic material was more than adequate. This is not a one-trick pony, so this is a platform for which we have developed an ERCP scope attachment and a colonoscope attachment coming as well. We also have a pathline in areas outside of GI with the plan to develop an EBIS finger probes to add, and even TEE. This is late-breaking news. On Monday, in collaboration with Dr. Carlos Robles and his team, we were able to take our technology and his cloud-based, real-time, on-the-fly AI and apply it literally out of the box. And so here you see the identification of the aorta, and here liver, spleen, spine, left kidney. It was extraordinary. I was blown away even just watching it. And so our fantasy then with respect to the strategics is maybe changed to this one, where maybe they actually start talking to us instead of the other way around. So where we are for the sharks, we've put significant founders money in. We've done a friends and family raise at 1.7. We have sold a multi-million-dollar license for the technology to China and have been funded with that. On the what are we looking for, we're seeking $5 million in equity raise, and we're looking for support and expertise in helping us navigate this opportunity. And so what better goal for a company than to take a crucial technology and to democratize it, to bring it to patients around the world? From the point of view of a therapeutic endoscopist, for me, it's personal. And so my goal is to take this patient's experience and see if we can't get that opportunity to other patients anywhere and everywhere. And so with that in mind, I'll stop and thank you all for your attention, and thanks to the Shark Tank for bringing this along. I was pleased to be on the program. I hope I'm not on the menu.
Thanks, Dr. Steinberg.
And by the way, and one last point, this is a full endoscopic ultrasound system in a bag. That's the whole thing.
That's terrific. I suspect it's just your dirty laundry in there, actually, right?
Actually, the Toomey bag does not come with it. It would break our cost of goods, so we can't.
So this is open for discussion. Maybe let's start at the end of the table. Perhaps, Chris, why don't you start, and Amrita, maybe you have something to say as well.
Sure, thanks. Great presentation. Really enjoyed it. And this is disposable, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
at this point, it's hybrid. So there's a reusable part, which is the expensive transducer, which is a 100-use piece at the present time, and then the carrier for the transducer and the parts that would be hard to clean are disposable. So
okay.
That's the razor blade here.
So I'm wondering what the ASP is going to be, what your cost of goods and your margin is looking like for each system.
And so we've done that analysis. It turns out that one of the early people who hired us was Josh Cohen, who had been the national sales manager for Pentax for endoscopic ultrasound and endoscopy. So he knows the market inside and out, and had done the ASC model for EUS for Pentax. And at that point, they felt that it was saleable at about $330 per procedure, whether you bought the capitalized and amortized it, or whether you did it on a cost of goods kind of thing. We think we have that price down to under $270 per procedure, and so we think it will be more favorable still.
And along with the disposable kind of question, everyone's concerned about the environment right now, plastic waste, carbon footprint, et cetera. What are you doing to address that?
So I think it's a great question, and I hadn't thought about it. So I think it's an important question that we need to put on our list. So I appreciate the question, but I don't have an answer for you. All I can say is we're a lot smaller than an Exalt or some of the disposable scopes in terms of what we have to deal with, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be cognizant.
Along those lines, I'll ask a couple questions. One, does this fit onto all brand endoscopes, both sizes and types? Yeah,
it's suitable for all upper endoscopes, and we're looking to come out with a therapeutic model so that we can literally expand the channel opportunity to most any size channel that is available.
And then for the portion that's hybrid and reusable, have you developed a cleaning method? Is that compatible with current
and so we have among those consultants Frank Canonica, who is the person who developed the standard for cleaning after the post-ERCP debacle. And so Frank actually has devised the RIFU for cleaning for us, and that cleaning process would entail some manual inspection and cleaning, but it would then go in the bath for high-level disinfection with the scope.
And what about integration into current medical system reporting systems? Integration.
Sure. So the imaging and the beamformer is all DICOM-3 compatible, so the images can be imported. The system itself has reporting systems, but we assume that people who have either Provation or other systems might prefer to use those.
And my last question is, do you see anything that is not provided by this system that is currently provided by the current EUS platforms?
So I think that remains work in progress. We only have now 10 in human. We actually did a couple of liver biopsies on Monday. And so I think at 10, I'd be foolish to say that I know all the answers to that question. I think there will likely be things that the current systems make a little easier. I think there are also some circumstances where our ability to be forward viewing and to be perpendicular to a puncture site might provide advantage. And so I think it's likely that it will fall on both sides of that, right? But I think clearly we are at an early stage in terms of our clinical understanding.
So I noticed that some of your ratings, I assume that's a 1 to 5 scale that you were showing us.
That's correct.
Some of them were down in the 3s. If you had to...
So, if I may.
Yeah.
So 3 meant equivalent. So if we were 3, then we were equivalent to the legacy system. If we were 4 or 5, we were better than the legacy system, 2 or 1 below. And so if we were to bring the slide back up again, you would see that in 55 out of 63 checks, we were at or better than the legacy system.
If you had to encapsulate the biggest criticism of the current prototype compared to standard, what would it be?
So I think the biggest criticism is that it handles differently than a linear scope. And so the hand maneuvers that you go through aren't the same. The experience was that most people got the hang of it on one pig interaction, if you will. One of the nice, if you've worked in pigs, you know that they have as anchors that can be the Grand Canyon, and they actually found that having a forward-viewing scope helped navigate that Zenkers because you could actually see where you were trying to put the scope.
Just wanted to follow up on cost of goods. Sorry, I don't think we got the final answer on cost of goods. If you're
Sure.
selling it for $300, you still need a handsome margin, right? I don't know what you're going to get. How much does it cost to make it? Are you in the $20, $30 range or $150?
So our margins, as we've last calculated, are running in the 58 to 62% range. Gross margins.
Yeah,
based on
that's
cost.
kind of tight.
And we hope that, particularly as transducer prices come down, that will change dramatically. And also, it's likely that we'll convert that beamformer into a single board function capability, which will also have us stamping out boards at a lesser cost.
So let's do 2 more questions really quickly. We'll take one from the audience.
Paul Akerman, how are you?
Hi.
Really terrific job in trying to solve an interesting problem here. This is really interesting, so there's lots of good questions about it. I think I missed it. But in the end, your pre or pre-money valuation was what on this?
So the pre-money valuation, I'd rather not have that be a public discussion if we don't mind right now, because that's still in negotiations literally this weekend.
Okay, yeah, if you're raising some money, but you
I understand.
Yeah.
But if you have a checkbook, I'd be happy to have the discussion with you.
I do.
Okay, Chuck, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm the surgeon here, and I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about your technology.
Yep.
But I'm not really buying this democratization baloney.
Okay?
So, is this going to allow more people have EUS done to them, and/or is this going to facilitate more people in your field to do the process of doing EUS and therefore propagate more?
So I think it's
And
both.
one last thing, if I could ask. Who's going to take care of the complications in these ambulatory centers?
So, okay.
They're going to happen.
Yeah, so let's take the last one first, okay? We think that EUS is well suited for the ASC setting for a variety of reasons. In my hands, I do close to 1,800 therapeutic-only procedures a year. About 1,000 of them are EUS. The vast majority of those are outpatient procedures. A percentage of them are endoscopic necrosectomies, their stent placements, their gallbladder, their gastro-J's, things of that sort. That's not the bulk of what I do. The bulk of what I do is to do staging, it's to do sampling of tumors and other lesions, it's to do lumps and bumps and cysts and things of that sort. Those, I think, are easily amenable. If you looked at our profile of complications, it's probably even less than the complication rate that we get from colonoscopy and polypectomy. So I think that's a manageable, as long as we as operators don't overstep our, reach beyond our grasp, right? So that would be number one. Number two, in terms of the question of democratization, we think that the first stage is the concept of moving it to an ASC and providing a technology that allows that to happen. I think if, as a surgeon, my surgical colleagues, I see them sitting around on the couch in the doctor's dining room waiting for their case to go off. When you're an endoscopist, you can't imagine anything worse. And so the idea of being able to take that case and do it in your own surgery center is one that we've already proven it. That's what's happened with the EGDs.
So it's a convenience factor.
It's also efficiency, right? I happen to be fortunate. I have 3 rooms, 2 anesthesia teams, and 2 nursing teams when I work. And so on Thursday, I did 16 procedures, right? My colleagues in general GI can't do that in the room next door. And so, but they can do it in their surgery center. And I think that's the concept. And then the second piece is that EUS is growing. It's growing at about 5% per year. Every training program has their fellows looking for that training. The ASGE is oversubscribed in terms of private people looking for training. If you went to Canada, it would cost you $50,000 to train in EUS. And so clearly it's a it's an imaging technology.
Growth industry going on.
Right, and imaging, if you can see it, you can do something.
All right, I think we're going to have to
Thank
wrap
you.
that up. Great presentation. We'll ask you more questions offline. Like, I was going to ask